Hello, this is a video about how to make a quiz in Schoology. So when you get into your Schoology stuff, you'll have your various classes, and you, interestingly, do not want to make your quiz in your classes because then it will be hard to find later on. And so the easiest thing to do is go into your Resources tab up here, Courses, Groups, Resources, go into Resources, and it would be best, obviously, if you had folders for your various classes and things like that. I obviously already do. So that way you can, put stuff where it actually belongs. So I'm going to go into this folder, and I'm going to make a quiz in this period. And the obvious thing to do here is to add resources. And so you can do all kinds of stuff here, but I'm going to just add a test quiz because that's what this video is about. All right. And then you will need a name for your quiz, and that's actually what it's going to be. You'll need some number of points. You can change this later, so I always just do 7 and then figure out how many questions I actually write. So that's what you start with, and it will create the basic quiz. All right. And so it starts with this, and you don't have any questions, so there's nothing to worry about with settings and previews. You just want to add a question. And the kinds of questions here have some different issues around them. True, false, obviously pretty straightforward. Those are irritating questions for most students. I don't usually use them. Multiple choice works super great, and that's almost the only thing I ever do. Ordering also works pretty well, but it's a little tricky. Basically, students will drag numbers around or things and put them in order. It's kind of useful for basic timelining stuff. It's a little tricky on phones, and I try and keep everything very phone friendly, so that one you can kind of play around with. Short answer essay questions I find really annoying to grade because you actually have to click into each assignment, click into the question, grade it. So I tend to see that as more trouble than it's worth. Fill in the blank also has a lot of issues around accuracy and grading, so I don't do that one. Matching works fairly well. Again, a little tricky if you have multiple long things and you're trying to do it on a phone. You can add questions if you have question banks. You can kind of make some interesting blank questions, but that's something for later. And then you can do some editing stuff. So I'm just going to do a multiple choice one because that'll tell you how to do a quiz. Multiple choice question comes up and has various things you can do about it. I tend to have an entire Google Doc usually with all my questions pre-written, no numbers or anything. I do it that way so I can spell check it. Also, it's just a lot easier to write the stuff in a Google Doc than in Schoology because you can see it all in one place. Also, it doesn't glitch out in Google Docs or a Word doc or whatever. So when you have this, doc with all your questions in, which I'm going to set off to the side here, the easiest thing is then just to drag the question from your doc, just copy it in, actually not drag. And I always just copy the whole question and the answers up here, just because that keeps it straightforward and I don't accidentally forget something. And then I just cut them out of the top into the spaces below, just to keep it quick. And that way I also don't forget or double up a answer. And that way, when I'm done, you have that. Do make sure to remember to backspace out or it'll format weird. All right, so then you got your question, you got your answers, and you have to identify the correct answer, obviously. You can have more than one correct answer. I sometimes do that for surveys and things, but that gets a little tricky on the grading, so usually it's going to be one question, one answer. If you need more choices, you can just click Add. You can add a ton of choices if you want. I'm going to add one additional choice, and then I could put in another answer here if I wanted. You can also just add a bunch of choices if you don't really know how many you have, and then click Remove Blanks, and it'll automatically go back to the ones that you actually have. So that's how you make a question, basically. And then you have a choice here to randomize. Sometimes that makes sense. If you, like these ones, it would make sense to do it because there's no particular order to these. Usually if you have a none of the above, you're not going to randomize the choices because none of the above might be the first answer, or you might want them to read through a bunch of kind of tempting fake answers before they get to the right answer, whatever you want to do. You can randomize the choices. You can allow partial credit. I have never done that and don't know what it does. Timed question is important. I have settled on 2 minutes for the time available. If you set it for 1 minute, it's a little rushed for kids. And if you set it for more than 2 minutes, the key problem there is the test will take a really long time. because like if you even have 5 questions, that might be a 10-minute long test, and some kids will take that long. Beyond that, they can start texting each other for the answers. They could also have problems with like dropped internet or Schoology glitches out, which does happen. So it's just easiest to do 2 minutes. Kids haven't really complained about that very much. You can set things for being multiple points. You could align learning objectives, which I've never done. But basically, you're just going to create the question. All right. And then you have a 1-question quiz. I am going to make one more question just so you can see how that looks again. And sort of same process, just copy the whole question out of my document. I don't know exactly how many answers I have here, so I'm just gonna add 4. And I'm gonna, whoops. Let's see if that actually copied. Nope. I don't even know what I did there. All right, so I'll put that one in. Control X, Control V, Control X, Control V, Control X, Control V. That kind of screwed me up. Control X, Control V, Control X, Control V, Control X, Control V, Control X, Control V. All right, and then I got too many, so I'm going to remove blanks. And the actual answer to this, as it always is when you have none of the above, is none of the above. So click that. And then in this case, I'm not going to randomize the choices because I want that none of the above at the bottom. So I'm going to leave that unchecked. Still 2-minute question. So click in 2. And then I am going to create the question. All right, so now I have my little 2-question quiz. You have these settings and preview things. I never bother with them in this part because I'm going to change that class by class. So I just leave it. Preview does allow you to see what the questions actually look like, but it doesn't actually show you any scores or anything like that. It just kind of like leads you through the questions so you can kind of see how it looks. And this is what the students will see, although it'll actually count down for them on the timing. But generally, I don't do that. I'm going to go back to resources because that will allow me to actually move the thing around. So I know where I created it in my Renaissance to Modern. There is my quiz. So this is the thing I just made, and I'm going to add it to a class. And I will, in order to add it to a course, you can obviously edit and change things through those. But adding to a course is this button. And then I'm going to add it to a class where I don't think they're going to find it today, this one. You can put in a particular folder if you have it. You can change the number of max points. This can also be changed later. You can set a due date. I'll make it due tomorrow just for the heck of it. I always make all my assignments due at 11:05 that's the one that works for me. And the one thing you do have to do at West Seattle High School is choose a category, and it has to be ungraded because this is not actually tied into our grade book. And if you don't do that, it'll glitch out. So make sure to do category ungraded. It's a useless little step, but necessary, or annoying little step. And then you click add. And so I just added that to my 4th period class. So I'm going to go to my courses, Contemporary World Problems 4th period, and there is my quiz. This is where you're actually going to have to do the settings. So once you have your quiz made, you're going to have to edit it once it's in the place it's supposed to be. And this is where you can figure out how many points. Like, since I only have 2 questions, I should make that 2 points, and I'm going to save the changes. All right, so now it's worth 2 points. It's in the right place. You'd think it was ready to go, but it's not. So you have to click on it, and then you have to click on settings. And when you click on settings, you can put in special instructions if you want. You could have actually done this in the original, like if you would wanted to make them watch a video or something like that. I always just doing super basic ones, so I never bother. Submissions is the tricky thing. It always defaults to disable, so if you actually want the students to be able to take the test, you actually have to click enable. You can also set it to obviously have like a dead date. They can take it until 2 weeks from now if you feel like, or you could set it so that like it only shows up for them 2 days from now until 2 weeks from now or something like that. So there are those options. You can set an attempt limit. If I'm doing a fairly complicated reading and a difficult test, and especially if it's kind of a formative thing that's meant to drag them through the reading, I usually do 2 times. And as you see here, when it reports out on the results screen, if you set it to highest score, you can do other things, but highest score is the one I always use. Then you'll just actually have a list of student names and scores, and it's easy to get into your gradebook that way. And it'll only choose the best of the 2 attempts, which is nice for the students. You can decide whether to randomize the question order. You sometimes would do that if it's more assessment-y. If you're trying to just pull them through a reading in a formative kind of way, then randomizing the order doesn't make sense. You can probably do some stuff with language keyboard. I've never messed with that. You can set it to be resumable so they can start and stop. I never do because I keep mine pretty short. And then the view submissions is interesting. You can set it to no, so they just get the result and they don't know, whether they got it right or not. You can say yes, and then they can see what they missed and didn't miss, but they won't know exactly why they did it. Or you can actually give them the correct answer if you're mostly using this as a teaching tool as opposed to an assessment tool. I tend to do no or yes. I pretty much never do yes with correct answers because I do use it for a tiny bit of points. All right, and then once you have that, then you have to click Save Changes. That might be below the scroll, and sometimes I forget to do it, which is super annoying. So click Save Changes, and then your test is ready to go. The results after the students take it will be in this tab, and you'll have a list of student names. You'll have a list, in this case, of the highest score, going down student by student. It'll tell you when they took it, and it'll have a little identifier if it's late. I can't show you the results because that would give you real student names, but it's very straightforward to see what happened when you just click the results tab. And then if you have your gradebook open in another screen, you can easily just type in all the scores really quickly. So very easy to make and use quizzes in Schoology.